Dispatches is on the hunt for ancient treasures. In London, Copenhagen, Cambridge and Syria. We formed a crack team of experts.
You've been beavering away, haven't you?
They're going undercover to pose as wealthy art collectors and challenge the dealers.
What documents have you got?
As ISIS plunders ancient sites in Syria to help finance its terror campaign, we ask what's being done to stop those treasures reaching these shores.
In London, you've got the second largest antiquities market in the world, and we've got a three-man team policing it.
ISIS, the terrorist group that's waging a jihad on the West. In Syria and Iraq, they've killed thousands, with millions more fleeing.
Allahu Akbar!
They're organised, with well-funded and well-equipped fighters. And some of the cash to pay for that is coming from the selling of ancient artefacts. UNESCO says it's happening on an industrial scale. World leaders say putting a stop to the looting is key to defeating ISIS.
Ancient treasures in Iraq and Syria have now become the casualties of continuing warfare and looting. No one group has done more to put our shared cultural heritage in the gun sights than ISIL.
One of the most important sites seized by ISIS was the ancient Roman city of Palmyra. Last May, its fighters captured the city and released propaganda footage from inside. 3 weeks ago, the Syrian army won it back, but it's still not known how much of the city's treasures have been looted. I'm Simon Cox, and I've been investigating the trade in looted artifacts for more than a year. Speaking to smugglers on the Syrian border and the police and dealers in Beirut. But recently, I've been looking closer to home. London is the second biggest antiquities market in the world and probably the biggest for Islamic art. My sources say looted items are turning up here. To check out that claim, Dispatches has assembled a top team of monuments men and women. Part of their day job is to keep an eye on the trade. They know where to look and what to look for. And now they're going undercover to investigate for us. Mayfair, where big money meets high art and where an ancient vase can fetch as much as a brand new Ferrari.
Those are beautiful, aren't they?
Two of our team are Professor Augusta McMahon of Cambridge University and Dr. Alessio Palmisano of University College London. They're both experts in Eastern antiquities and think they found something suspect, possibly from Syria, on sale here.
Hello, hi. Do you remember me? I came here 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
The shop owner's called Elias Assad. What's got our experts excited is this 6-foot piece of carved stone. It's a lintel, and they think it's from Syria.
So what is the price? If I remember well, you told me £50,000.
No, it's much less now.
It's much
it's
less.
Not mine. They want to get rid of it now.
They want to
Get rid of it.
Yeah. And how much is it?
I think 25 or 30,
25.
something like that.
Assad claims he doesn't own the lintel. The man who does is keen to shift it. But is there any paperwork to prove where it's from? After a quick search, he can't find any documents. 40 minutes later, the owner of the lintel arrives.
Nice to meet you.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Meet Fares Dalul.
Oh, so this is our client.
How are you? But you bought from someone, I guess.
Yes.
So the certificate shows everything.
I have invoice.
Okay, yeah.
I have invoice. Is this invoice? I give it to you. I don't care.
Okay.
I have invoice. They come here legal.
He promises all the paperwork's in order and says the piece is even mentioned in a reference book.
So you said that this comes from...
No. Someone come from Germany before 100 years and more and take all the picture from this place. Also, you could find in this book this picture. From this
Okay.
one. Yeah. And they write everything about this.
He's just given us our first clue about its history. Dick Ellis ran Scotland Yard's Art and Antique Squad, and he's agreed to look at our undercover footage.
And they write everything about this.
They were talking about the object being recorded in some book. This would suggest that this is actually a catalogued piece. This is from a known site. Clearly, if it should be in a site, which no doubt is protected under that country's cultural property laws, then it is not free to be bought and sold on the open market.
While there aren't strict rules governing the trade, there are voluntary guidelines that most dealers sign up to. The most important is that dealers should be able to prove the history of an item, something known as the provenance. It's to prevent the sale of stolen or looted items. In Cambridge, Professor McMahon has been tracing the history of the stone lintel.
So this is all the documentation. We started from Faris, the seller, saying that it was published, the lintel was published by a German in a book a long time ago, and it came from the site of Naua. So in looking around, I did actually find what I think is that book. So it's written by a guy named Gottlieb Schumacher in 1886 and shows a drawing of the lintel. But there's enough detail of the imagery to be able to match it up.
So looking at this evidence, we definitely know now that it's from Syria.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's been documented from in 1880s and through the 1930s as being present on the site as an architectural element in an existing standing building.
So we need to do some more work to pinpoint exactly when it left. Do you think you'll be able to do that?
I hope so.
So you've been trying to find some stuff then?
Discovering the exact date that it left Syria will tell us whether it's been stolen, because the country banned any antiquities leaving after 1963. We also now know it's originally from Naua, a town in southern Syria, a region caught up in Syria's civil war and where ISIS is fighting. Back in London, we've arranged to meet the lintel's owner, Mr. Delul, and we've asked him to bring the paperwork he promised.
Hello, hi. Sorry for the delay, but I had a lot of things to do.
This is from the shipper.
So this is the...
He shows us a shipping note for 3 items.
Storage here and this.
Okay.
And this is 1021, another import charge. Here.
And a bill for storage.
Okay. So this is 2007.
Problem is, these could be for anything. There's no mention of a stone lintel on either of them.
Okay. It was a private owner. Who was this?
While Assad's still trying to help with the sale, Delul reveals he's not keen on another kind of paperwork: tax forms.
Also, we need cash. We don't take check.
You don't take...
We don't want, because a check would pay 20% VAT.
Ah, yeah. So with the cash, you don't pay the taxes and...
For someone who is a Jewish and have money and big house, this would be magnificent.
Document that's come from both our Syrian colleagues and our...
Back in Cambridge, Professor McMahon thinks she's found the final missing piece in the lintel's history.
And this is a museum record that actually gives description of the lintel. This photograph is actually from 1988. So that proves without a doubt that it's present in Syria at the site of Naua in 1988, well after the 1963 antiquities laws.
Wow, so you found out 1988 it's definitely there, so that means under Syrian law it's been illegally removed.
Yes, absolutely. That's all the evidence we need to prove that it was removed illegally, was exported illegally. There's no question that this object in the photograph and the object that's in London are exactly the same thing.
Armed with the evidence, time for one last visit to Assad and Dalul. There's no evidence to suggest the lintel is linked to ISIS, but we know it was definitely looted because it was removed decades after a blanket ban was introduced in Syria.
Everyone I've asked about said you need to know about provenance of the item and its history and all that sort of thing, and if it's been in a collection or anything like that, but you don't really know.
No, I don't bought from collection.
No, see, because it was from a dealer, and then before.
If I have a provenance, I can put it in the auction. I said maybe 10 times more.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So it's without provenance. It's
I
not
put in
worth
the
as much.
auction.
Yes.
But we don't need the paper. If I want to put it in Christie or Sotheby's,
yes.
I want the provenance. I bought from you, and before you have it, before 40 years, 50 years.
Yes, I understand. Yes, but there's
no, I don't have a provenance.
But
I have only invoice. But I give you customer, you need the provenance.
That's it. Yes, that's what everybody
Provenance,
asks.
I can give you.
Yes.
If I have a provenance, I can put it in the auction.
If it was a legitimate piece that could be bought and sold on the open market, and you heard him say, heavens, if we had provenance, we'd have stuck it into Christie's or Sotheby's and made a lot more money. So, you know, my immediate reaction is, it's hot, and they know it.
We wrote to Elias Assad. He said he had no idea about the lintel's history. He wasn't selling it and was merely and perhaps naively storing it as a favour to Mr. Dalul. A spokesman added
that he does not and never has dealt with antiquities from Syria and ensures that his pieces are genuine with appropriate provenance.
Dispatches also wrote to Mr. Dalul to raise our concerns. He hasn't replied. We told the police and they've seized the lintel. Dispatches understands it's now on the Interpol database. The Syrians are demanding it's returned. The main way the antiquities market is policed is through guidelines set out by the industry itself. James Eade founded one of the trade organisations.
We have an extremely stringent code of ethics in both the trade associations which I represent, ensuring that people do the very best they can to establish the provenance of objects. But one has to recognise that a large number of objects will not have demonstrable proof of provenance, even though they're perfectly legal on the market, because many people have things in their homes that they've had for 50 years. So we have to bear in mind what we call orphans, in other words, legal objects on the market which don't have demonstrable evidence, and they have to be in some way dealt with.
In part 2, we head overseas to track down a man selling a suspicious Quran on eBay.
Do you want to have a seat here, and then we can have a look on the table?
Last May, US Special Forces stormed the Syrian hideout of ISIS commander Abu Sayyaf. They discovered his private treasure trove of looted items, but also official paperwork revealing ISIS had created its very own, very grand-sounding antiquities division. Around 300 of Syria's cultural sites have been damaged or destroyed since the start of the civil war, including 6 World Heritage Sites. Archaeologist Graham Phillip is using advanced satellite imagery to see the destruction that's happening on the ground.
If we look at the site of Mari, Mari is over in eastern Syria, close to the Euphrates River. And there's a big palace in the centre of the site. This was a very popular visitor attraction.
And we've got a later image, haven't we, to see what it's like?
Over here, all these, again, looting holes. I presume people are digging holes speculatively to see if there's anything in it.
And what's interesting about Mari is we know it's under the control of
This
IS,
is under the control of IS and may well be one of the sites that has been looted under licence, as it were, because I know they now issue official permits They have a kind of shadow Department of Antiquities, and they issue permits to excavate, or what we would call permits to loot, and ISIS take a commission.
And this, as they say, is one they made earlier. It's an official ISIS looter's permit. Doesn't muck about, gets straight to the point. It says to the Brothers of Islamic State, whoever has this has permission to supervise and excavate antiquities. In other words, it's a license to plunder. The entire antiquities trade in the UK is worth more than £20 million a year.
If you're going to a store, you're going to buy something, you should know up front if the object is legal or not, you know, and this is what we do normally for buying a TV, so I don't see why we couldn't do this for antiquities.
Mark Alterwheel keeps a constant watch on antiquities being sold online.
There are plenty of Syrian objects online to buy, but the nature of the crisis makes us much more aware of what's going on now in terms of are people now potentially buying antiquities that are funding terror groups or groups that are involved in the conflict, and which thus perpetuates the violence, and that's something that we have to be wary about.
Acting on a tip-off from the US, we're looking into an eBay page that claims to be selling a rare Safavid manuscript from Iran. The site is called London Oriental. It's clearly well established, with around 500 artifacts for sale, including this ornate Quran. But it's the photos intended to help sell the item that's triggered our experts' interest. One shows a crude tear in one of the pages. eBay does have terms and conditions to stop stolen or looted items being sold on its site, but what about this one? It's time to contact the man who tipped us off. Andres Riedelmeier, world expert in Islamic manuscripts based at Harvard University Library.
The tearing off of the owner's seal is a clear indication that someone is trying to conceal the fact that this manuscript was stolen. The tear is very bright and white and clear, so I think it stands to reason that it was probably removed quite recently.
He's got his doubts about the seller's description too.
After 30 years of experience with Islamic manuscripts, I'm quite sure it is not from Iran.
London Oriental is based in London, but the man behind it has asked us to meet him here, in Copenhagen. And I've brought along another expert, Yasmin Fahihi.
So these are some of the images of the Quran that's for sale. He's saying it's Safavid, it's from Iran. What do you make of it?
I wouldn't say this is Safavid. This is quite clearly Ottoman and later, 19th, 20th century.
Ottoman means it's more likely that it came from either Syria or Iraq, where ISIS is active.
The paper would be interesting to look at, and perhaps the binding, if it's original, whether it's complete. But I can tell from this page, from this opening already, that it's not a Safavid Quran.
Manuscripts in Arabic writing decorated with gold colouring like this one are listed in what's called the Emergency Red List, a catalogue compiled by museums around the world to help spot possible looted items. There's no evidence to suggest that this Quran is linked to ISIS, but we've consulted 3 experts who've concerns about its history. We've set up a meeting. We're posing as wealthy London buyers. We've rigged the hotel room with 3 secret cameras. The man with the Quran has arrived, and he's waiting for me in the lobby.
Hello, pleased to meet you.
He's called Shibli Binbourg, and he's brought a friend, Basil Adelnor, who describes himself as an antiques dealer. There's no evidence that Adelnor is linked to the eBay page London Oriental.
Do you want to have a seat here so we can have a look on the table? So, we're keen to have a look. Have you got it?
Yes.
Where's it from?
It's from Holland.
No, but originally, where's it from?
I'm from Iran, Safavid.
Right.
Yeah, Persian.
What documents have you got to show where it's from,
Yeah,
where you got it?
Any original descriptions from the seller?
No, I don't have original description. I have on my email, but I have invoice.
Right.
When did you buy it?
I buy a lot from him. This book from 15.
Yeah?
2015. Oh, that's very recent.
This tear here on the page, do you know what that is?
It's a little before me. It looked like this when I bought it.
Did he say what that was? Why there was that tear?
You didn't ask?
Yasmin has seen enough. After close inspection, she still suspects it was originally taken from a Syrian library. He hasn't provided any proof of its provenance. It's time to reveal I'm a reporter.
I mean, they're very beautiful books. It's just very difficult when there's no provenance beyond this one invoice, really, isn't it? Shibli, I'm actually a reporter. My name's Simon Cox. I work for Channel 4 Dispatches. We're investigating items that may have been looted or may have been stolen. What do you have to say about that? And there's no documentation.
Do you have any evidence that this one is looted from somebody?
Well, we've had 3 leading experts in this field look at this item, and they have said it is definitely not Safavid. They think that it's Ottoman, that it's probably could well be from Syria or Iraq.
It's not Safavid. I'm sure about it.
Well, that's how you were selling it, as Safavid. When we asked you repeatedly, he was saying it was Safavid. Well, what do you think about selling items that, according to experts we've talked to, there's a worry that they may have been looted or stolen? You may not know that. You're the ones who were advertising it on eBay.
I have right not to talk here if you want to, because you have no right to do like this.
On the way out, Mr. Adilnur wants a quiet word.
Do you know for sure that these are looted?
Well, you're dealing in antiquities and you're not asking questions about where they're coming from. You have a duty to ask that, and we have a duty to report it.
We informed UNESCO and the Met Police of our findings. Within 24 hours of our meeting, the Quran was no longer for sale on London Oriental. Soon after, the company's site was removed from the internet entirely. Shibli bin Borg told us that he'll be more careful about who he's buying from in future, and that he'd seen similar items with similar markings for sale in famous auction houses. Mr. Adilnur said he was simply in the wrong time and the wrong place. He hadn't had the opportunity to see the merchandise before the meeting and was just there to translate the Arabic texts. Back in the UK, ports are one of the main entry points for traded treasures. It's the job of the border force to impound any suspect items. But according to the man who used to police the market, they haven't seized any antiquities in the last 5 years.
These pieces are moving through customs, they're moving through our ports all the time, and yet not a single item is seized in this country. And at a time when you're reading constantly that these sorts of objects, when they're looted in Syria, when they're looted in Iraq, are helping to fund terrorism, why on earth aren't we doing more to stop them coming onto the market?
Last September, Border Force officers here in Felixstowe inspected a container that arrived from Syria. Documents with it said it was full of personal and household items, but Dispatches has learned that it also may have contained ancient antiquities destined for a dealer in London. The shipment was released and no arrests were made. Border Force said they'd consulted an expert and there was nothing to suggest the items had been illegally removed from Syria. Dispatches has discovered the police were investigating too. They brought in experts who thought the shipment definitely did need further investigation. One of them was Mark Alterwheel.
I took a look at a number of pictures from that shipment, and there were a couple of objects that seemed quite ancient. Ideally, I think those kinds of objects should be seized, at least held over by the border officials, because obviously if there's ancient objects likely coming from Syria, I think there's reasonable suspicion at that point.
We asked Border Force if it had seized any antiquities over the last 5 years, but it said it didn't publish such data. A spokesman added,
"Suspect items are detained and will be seized when evidence and advice from museum experts indicate they have been illegally removed from their country of origin."
One of the founders of the industry's trade body believes his organisation is doing all it can.
How much of a problem do you think looted Syrian antiquities coming to the UK is?
Well, coming to the UK, I don't think is really a problem at the moment. Clearly, there are mechanisms in place in this country to stop smuggled material coming in. And I'm not saying that nothing is coming out of Syria. I am saying it's not on an industrial sale and that it is not something that is funding ISIS.
But the US government thinks it is, and our team of experts believe more drastic measures are needed.
Ideally, I'd like to see a moratorium on antiquities related to Syria and Iraq, but barring that, some kind of way to track objects so we begin to have a better understanding of the life history of these objects. So I think there are things we can take to at least limit the sale of antiquities coming from the region.
They really need to be doing something, particularly in London, where you've got the second largest antiquities market in the world and the largest Islamic market in the world. And we've got a three-man team policing it. It's not enough.
The brand new series of 24 Hours in Police Custody returns Wednesday night at 9, with the Bedfordshire Police trying to figure out if people found inside a truck are migrants or being used for human trafficking. Next tonight, though, from field to plate, we're joining the food chain.